Welcome back, folks, to the Real Men of Real Estate radio show here on KCAA Radio. I knew that you weren't going anywhere because if you listen to the last segment, Dan Zitofsky and I were talking about passive income, creating a prosperous lifestyle, and being able to utilize note investing, mortgage note investing as the vehicle to get you there. So I knew you were still going to be here, folks, and we're back with Dan Zitofsky, author of Passive to Prosperous. Right. And we're going to talk about his book here later in the show. But we were ending that last segment talking about why note investing can be more passive and allow you to live a more prosperous and free lifestyle. Right. But here's one of the things I always get, Dan, when I tell people about mortgage notes. Tell them you're going to own someone's mortgage and they're going to pay you the mortgage payment every month. And people who are new to this say, well, what if they don't pay? Right. And there's always some animosities. It sounds too good to be true that you can actually become the bank and just collect mortgage payments. And so here's what I tell folks, Dan, see if you agree. I say, listen, if you buy one of these mortgage notes, folks, okay, you invest into a mortgage note, they transfer that responsibility to you. And now you're going to go move forward by collecting the rest of someone's mortgage payments, right? Okay. So there's really three things that can happen, folks, if you buy a mortgage note. See if you agree, Dan. Number one, they could pay you as agreed. Let's say you buy a note that still has 20 years left of mortgage payments on it. One of the things that could happen, folks, is the people pay their mortgage payment on time every month for the next 20 years. That could happen. And if that does happen, folks, you're making a better than average yield. You have an investment that's protected, or shall we say collateralized, and it spits off monthly cash flow. Who doesn't want that for 20 years straight on one investment, right? So that's okay. That'd be fine. Another thing that may happen, you know, people sometimes sell their houses and go and retire in Florida, don't they? Sometimes people refinance their existing mortgage loan with a new bank because they don't like their interest rate or who knows what, right? And so, folks, if somebody sold their house and you owned the mortgage, somebody refinanced with a new bank, what we receive is called early payoff. And that means all of the money they owe you, they have to pay you right then. Now, we buy these notes at a discount. I'm not going to get into confusing people at that. But bottom line, folks, is usually if they sell the house or they refinance their mortgage, it generally actually increases our yield as note investors. And it's not always a bad day. Sometimes we call that a windfall profit, and we take all that money in profit and we go buy some more notes with it, right? That's okay. Would that be fine? Yes. Here's the one everyone's afraid of, right, Dan? Yeah, but what if they stop paying the mortgage, man? You invested this money and now you're not collecting cash flow. And well, guys, remember, you're the bank. So I'm going to just ask the audience this. What do you think happens if you own a home and you owe money on your mortgage to Wells Fargo and you as the homeowner don't pay your mortgage for 3 or 4 months? What do you think Wells Fargo does? Well, I'll tell you what, folks. Remember in the last segment, we told you that you voluntarily pledged your home as collateral to the bank. Okay, you voluntarily pledged your home as collateral to the bank. So they say, well, if you don't pay us, by the terms of that promissory note we filled out, if you don't pay us, then we're just going to take your house. And I got to tell you something, folks, even though that's our last resort as private investors, private note investors, it's our last resort. I don't want to foreclose on people. You do have that as an option, but we can try loan modifications and all sort of different things to avoid that. But the bottom line, folks, is sometimes we may have to foreclose on somebody. Sometimes we may have to take back a property. And I'll tell you what, usually when we're investing in these notes, the property is worth far more than what you've invested to get the note. And so essentially it would be a bad day for the homeowner, but a good day for the note investor if you had to foreclose. Okay. So folks, those are the three things that might happen to you. They'll pay as agreed, they'll pay you off early, or they'll stop paying. All three of those scenarios generally work out very well for the note investor. And that's why we fall in love with this, right, Dan?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
That's why we fall in love. Now, Dan, let's just get into a little of your story, right? Because, you know, you were saying how people get into wholesaling and then people get into flipping, and this is kind of the progression in real estate. Well, you've done pretty much all of it, right? And then you gravitated towards notes. And why? Can you give us like your background story and how you got into real estate investing? And really, I know that story about you, Dan, that I just heard this weekend, in fact, at the Noteworthy conference in Anaheim. Shout out to Noteworthy. But, you know, you have a great story that says, you know, you worked so hard and made so much money, but it took away maybe from your lifestyle, maybe took away even from your family relationships and things like that. And when you found notes, it changed your whole life. Can you give me that story?
Sure. Well, in growing up, and I'll make that part a little quick. In growing up, it wasn't an easy life. It wasn't a good life. I'm not rags to riches, but it was a very tough life. And I always thought one day I'm going to get rich and I'm going to be happy, right? And I got into the real estate game. I bought my first property 18 years old. I bought it with a credit card. Then I went into the Navy. I came out of the Navy. I was a police officer. I started building up a rental and a fix and flip portfolio. And while I was doing that, I started seeing flips making me 40, 50 to $80,000 a flip. And I was doing 30 to 50 flips easily a year, consistently, sometimes more flips. A lot of my flips were making north of $100,000. So you can see that multiple seven-figure years added up pretty quickly. The problem is I did that and I was a police officer and I said, I'm going to do this until I don't have to be a police officer anymore because I just didn't want to do that. Then I was involved in 9/11. I was in the second building that crashed down. And I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I had to get out. So I really expedited my fix and flipping business tremendously. And I was making, like I said, a lot of money on that. But what happened is I grew up, didn't have the nice things, didn't have the car, didn't have any cars. I had to buy my own car at 14. I had to pay for myself to do everything. I had to go out. I had to give my own money. Go to college. I had to pay for myself. Anything I wanted, I had shoes, clothes, and I'd get the basic, and that was it. You're on your own. So I always had to, I always swore to myself, I'm going to be rich. I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to be happy. Well, what happens is I started making a lot of money, right? I started making multiple seven figures a year. And with that, I started doing what a lot of young people do that make that kind of money, right? I started showing off. I started buying the beautiful cars, the watch collection, right? The boats, just everything I could do to show off, right? To show people, hey, look at me. I'm rich now. I make a lot of money and I'm happy. I'm living the average. I'm living that, not the average, I'm living the better than average life for most American families. I have a beautiful house in a country club golf course. Got everything you could imagine. But to the point of, I still remember the story. It was a Sunday night. We're out to dinner it was 4 couples. And we get to dinner on a Sunday night at like 6:30 at night. And I had to take a call from the realtor and the contract. We were supposed to close the deal the next day and it was blowing up. So with the inspections, I had to take a call. 6:30 at night, I'm outside. My wife is in dinner with 3 other couples, and I'm outside talking on the phone the whole time. She comes out at almost 9 o'clock, throws my bag at me, and says, "Here's your expletive dinner, right? Enjoy it." And right away, I'm like, whoa, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't want to be doing this. I'm doing this for you, right? I'm busting my butt working, making all this money so you could have vacations, you could have cars, you could have jewelry, you could have everything you want, a beautiful house. You don't have to work. You take care of the kids. You could do that. And I'm busting my butt and you're going to do this to me. So we had a blown out hardcore fight. And I remember her saying to me at that point when we were home, and she says, a lot of things were said. We don't go through that. A lot of things were said. And she basically got to the point where she says, you're not a good husband. You're not a good father. You're not there for anybody. And I just blew up. I said, I'm not there. I'm doing all this for you. I'm busting my butt working, flipping all these houses, dealing with all this crap and this stress and headaches so you could have a good life. So you could have all these cars. So you could have a boat. So you could have every jewelry. You could have everything you want. And she just turned around and says, we didn't want any of this. All we wanted was you. And says, you're a terrible husband, terrible father, all of that stuff. You're not there for the kids. You're not there for me. You're there for yourself. And you know what? If I was being honest, she was right. She was right. If I look in the mirror, and I'm getting goosebumps even talking about it, she was right. Yeah. And I was doing it to buy things to impress people that didn't really matter in my life. The ones who would matter were my kids, to be there, to raise them as a father, to be a man for my kids and raise them and show them what a father is, show them what a husband is and a father is. Well, I kind of dropped to my knees at that point, and I'm not a sensitive guy, but hysterical crying. Like, I don't know what to do now, right? I'm a bad father, I'm a bad husband. I thought I was great. What do I do? Because I don't want to go back to the police department. I don't want to work a job for $50,000 a year. I can't do that. All I really knew how to do to make a lot of money was flip houses. Well, then I started converting them, right? I started saying, well, what do I really want? I got with Micah, what do I really want? And I said, I really want to do this so I can live the life I want to live. Well, what does that life look like? What is your why? Well, my why is, and my vision is to do what I want, when I want, with whomever I want. Well, how can you really do that if you're working 80 to 100 hours a week flipping these houses, right? So your vision says this, but your actions say this. They're going way off in left field, right? You're not aligned. And even when I coach students, that's exactly what I coach them on. It's the same thing. We bring them back to alignment, right? You got to be in alignment with your vision and your why. So I started doing rentals. And I always tell people, I said, listen, and I'll take it at the bare minimum numbers. I said, listen, if it wasn't at least $40,000 a property, I didn't flip it. I would wholesale it. So let's say 40,000 is kind of sexy. $400 is about the minimum I make on a rental property, or a note, I should say. Well, it says $40,000. Would you rather have 40,000 or would you rather have $400? And almost everybody says, oh, that 40,000 is a lot more sexy. And I go, I get it. But when you do $400 a couple of hundred times, it gets pretty damn sexy when you can do what you want, when you want, with whom you want. The way to do that is to get into the note business, to really get into the note business. Now, I do have a rental portfolio. 2/3 of my portfolio is seller finance notes, and 1/3 is rental properties. But my rental properties are kind of legacy properties that I keep for the family. But it's very important to have a plan, right? So a lot of people go at this without a plan. They just like, oh, I'm going to go buy single family rentals. And then, well, I saw some guru talking about, oh, own one roof and own 100 doors, get a multifamily. And then what do? You're working your butt off for investors. That's all you're doing. They're taking 70, 80%. You're taking 20, 30%. You're doing all the work. You're on all the management calls. You're doing the turnovers. You're dealing with the banks. You're dealing with the investors. That wasn't sexy. So 2019, I sold 800 of my doors, right? So it basically came down to all I own now is single family homes, and 2/3 of them are seller finance notes that pay me money every single month. And if you set these up correctly, we talk about risk. And obviously you never could tell people there's no risk. You legally can't tell the people that there is risk. You could lose your money. Do your due diligence, check with your attorney, check with your accountant. Don't trust anything anyone says, trust and verify. But the only thing I ever guarantee to anybody and any investor I work with that works with me, I always tell them this: I will mitigate the risk the best I possibly could because I'm a due diligence freak, but I can't guarantee anything. So when you get in the note business, if you get involved in a program, and I know you guys teach an amazing program, Patrick, you and Desi, if you get involved with note educators that have done this before for years and have seen the caveats that come up, they can VIP you to the fast lane on learning how to mitigate your risk.
Yes, guys. And thank you, Dan, for plugging. I'll plug the university later in the show, but guys, he's telling you that he wanted to create a better life for himself and his family. And you're not going to do that if you're working 80 to 100 hours a week. And so we're talking about how to go get yourself passive income so that you can live that prosperous life that you really want and actually spend time with your family. Ain't that right? So we're going to be right back with more of Dan Zitofsky, the author of Passive to Prosperous, here in just a few minutes, folks. Please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.